Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the suspect in Sunday's attack in Colorado has been charged with a hate crime. The man allegedly shouted "Free Palestine" as he threw fire bombs at a Jewish event in Boulder. Authorities are still investigating the attack that left 12 people injured. David Lamb tells us what we know so far. Israel reports striking a Hamas command center in the central Gaza Strip, while residents say a mosque was hit. Meanwhile, Iran says they will respond soon to a new U.S. nuclear proposal. Jason Perry reports. Russia and Ukraine successfully conclude their second round of direct talks and agree on several key points. Arian Pazdar has what they agreed on and what the White House is saying. The Supreme Court says it will consider reviving a lawsuit that challenges Illinois' ability to count mail ballots received after Election Day. Our legal correspondent Arlene Richards takes a closer look.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. After the fiery attack on protesters in Boulder, Colorado over the weekend, authorities charged the suspect with a hate crime. A dozen victims have been identified in the event, which called for the release of Israeli hostages. NTD's David Lamb reports.
A horrific incident as a perpetrator threw handmade bombs toward crowds of protesters on Sunday in Boulder, Colorado. The crowds were advocating for the return of hostages held by Hamas terrorists.
Mr. Solomon stated that he had been planning this attack for a year. And he acted because he hated what he called the Zionist group. And when he was interviewed about the attack, he said he wanted them all to die. He had no regrets, and he would go back and do it again.
A Homeland Security spokeswoman said the Colorado terrorist attack suspect, Mohammed Solomon, is illegally in our country. She said he entered the country in August 2022 on a tourist visa that expired in February 2023. The suspect, 45 years old, allegedly shouted "Free Palestine" as he threw the firebombs.
I will highlight for you that there were 16 unused Molotov cocktails that were recovered by law enforcement in the hours after the incident took place. 16. So I really want to thank the Boulder Police Department. There were 16 counts of attempted murder in the first degree. He's also charged with 2 counts of use of an incendiary device. He's also charged with 16 other counts of attempted use of an incendiary device.
According to court document, the suspect is being charged with a federal hate crime. President Trump said on Truth Social that acts of terrorism will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This is yet another example of why we must keep our borders secure and deport illegal anti-American radicals from our homeland. In a post on X, the police said that none of the victims in the attack has died. Witnesses recounted the dramatic scenes after the attack. One of them said the scene quickly turned chaotic as people looked for water to put out flames and find help.
These like shoots of fire, linear, about 20 feet long, spears of fire, 2 of them at least, came across right into the group about 15 feet from me.
When I saw fire, I saw people falling and screaming and crying and tripping, and I saw the attacker have a Molotov. He had 3 Molotov cocktails. One of them he threw inside of a group, and one lady lit on fire from head to toe. And then the other 4 people were also injured and in a fire, but not as bad as the first one.
Authorities said Solomon targeted volunteers with Run for Their Lives, a group that organizes running and walking events to call for the immediate release of Israeli hostages being held in Gaza. David Lamb, NTD News.
The suspect appeared in court today about half an hour ago, where his legal protections were confirmed. His next appearance is set for Thursday, when charges will be filed. Following the attack in Colorado, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is calling for sweeping visa restrictions and deportation measures. For a discussion on that with former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth in a panel with Mally Smith, tune in tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Capitol Report. In the Middle East, Israeli forces report striking a Hamas command and control center in the Gaza Strip. And in another development, Iran says they'll respond soon to the U.S. nuclear proposal they received over the weekend. NTD's Jason Parry has the update.
On Monday, residents in the Gaza Strip inspected the damage of a mosque that was reportedly struck overnight by an Israeli airstrike. On the same day, Israel reported striking a Hamas command and control center in the same city, Deir al-Balah, but they didn't mention that it was a mosque. A nearby resident shared his thoughts.
Al-Ansar Mosque was hit. When we came, we found the mosque destroyed. Where is the ceasefire? People are dying 1 million deaths. No food, no drink, no flour. Today you get some flour. You go to Rafah, and there you die.
Israeli forces are also operating in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. On Monday, they reported killing dozens of terrorists and dismantling terrorist infrastructure. A lieutenant colonel shared some of their recent findings.
You can see here many warheads, many long rockets. This is used by the terrorists to carry out rocket fire toward the Israeli home front. We will, of course, dismantle it.
Israeli forces recently expanded ground operations in the Gaza Strip as part of Operation Gideon's Chariots. And now Israel's chief of the general staff has ordered troops to expand ground operations to additional areas. Over the weekend, he told troops that Hamas is losing control. Meanwhile, the mother of a hostage recently shared her thoughts on a possible ceasefire deal that would release only some of the remaining hostages.
All the families, we are right now standing and thinking, is it going to be my son? Isn't? What will be? What will be after? Part of them will come. What will be with the rest? I can't describe what we are feeling.
58 hostages are still held in the Gaza Strip, and less than half are believed to still be alive. Talks for a ceasefire are ongoing, but no deal has been reached. Meanwhile, the talks between the U.S. and Iran over a nuclear deal are still ongoing as well. Over the weekend, Iran was given a U.S. proposal for a nuclear deal. And on Monday, Iran's foreign minister said they would reply soon about the proposal, and he added this.
There will be no agreement unless enrichment in Iran is respected and enrichment in Iran continues.
The U.S. has warned of military action in Iran if a nuclear deal is not reached. Jason Parry, NTD News.
Russia and Ukraine successfully conclude their second round of direct talks and agree on several key points. The White House is now weighing in. NTD's international correspondent Ariane Pozdar has the latest on the talks.
This war needs to come to an end, and this war has been brutal from both sides. Too many people have died, and the president wants this war to end at the negotiating table.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt commenting on the situation in Ukraine after Monday's talks between Russian and Ukrainian officials. After the first direct talks last month, both sides had agreed to exchange 1,000 prisoners of war each. At Monday's talks, they now agreed to exchange all prisoners in certain categories, regardless of the number.
We agreed to exchange all for all, seriously wounded and seriously sick prisoners of war. Second category is young soldiers who are from 18 to 25 years old, all for all.
Another point discussed during Monday's talks is a possible meeting between the presidents of Russia and Ukraine. So far, both sides have sent only representatives, in some cases low-level officials.
We firmly believe that all key issues can only be solved at the level of leaders. The leaders' meeting could be with possible involvement of other leaders, such as President of the United States.
Leavitt was asked whether President Trump would be open to join the talks, as suggested by the Ukrainian officials.
Well, the president has said he's open to it if it comes to that, but he wants both of these leaders and both sides to sit down at the table together. And we saw them do that at the urging of President Trump today. But as for how the president feels about those talks and what took place there, I'll let him speak on that.
And in terms of lasting peace, both sides drafted documents which they exchanged at the meeting. Ukrainian negotiators presented to the Russian side a proposed roadmap for reaching a lasting peace settlement. And Russia, meanwhile, drafted a memorandum for a possible peace agreement. According to Moscow, the memorandum addresses what Russia calls the root causes of the conflict. The head of Russia's delegation commented,
"The memorandum is quite detailed and worked through properly from our side. Therefore, the Ukrainian side decided to take it for study. If they study it, they will react to it, and we will see."
Ukraine said it will take a week to analyze the Russian document. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Republicans and Democrats are divided on party lines when it comes to the One Big Beautiful Bill, but they found common ground in foreign policy initiatives. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, breaks down this week's legislative agenda in the Senate.
Big and beautiful bill is it's a vehicle for increasing spending for the military and for the border. It's about $320 billion in new spending. To put that in perspective, that's more than all the DOGE cuts that we found so far. So the increase in spending put into this bill exceeds the DOGE cuts.
Senate Republicans have signaled that they will amend the reconciliation bill passed by the House last month. Senator Rand Paul warned President Trump that at least 4 Senate Republicans are ready to block the bill as it stands if it does not reduce government spending.
And so they've inflated the cost of the wall 8-fold. So there's a lot of new spending that has to be counteracted. But essentially, this is a bill by the military-industrial complex advocates who are padding the military budget.
Senate Democrats, on the other hand, oppose the bill altogether but have zeroed in on the Medicaid work requirements that Republicans are pushing for, in particular, those beneficiaries over 30 years old who are able-bodied.
And the data clearly shows that if you want to get people to work, the way to do that is to provide them just basic health care so that they don't get sick. And what they're trying to do now is take this terrible experiment in Georgia, force it on the whole nation. And what we will see as a result of that is a workforce that is sicker and poorer and an economy that's weaker.
The Senate has found bipartisan support for Senator Lindsey Graham's sanctions package against Russia.
There are very few causes that will take 41 Republicans and 41 Democrats, put them on record on a single piece of legislation. It doesn't happen these days.
And I think the Senate is fed up with Putin. The American people see Putin as unreasonable. They see Ukraine is trying. President Trump has made that distinction real. So the Senate and the House of Representatives in the next 2 weeks will be moving forward with a sanction bill that's bone-crushing.
Senator Graham and Senator Blumenthal both traveled to Ukraine over the weekend and met with President Zelensky. President Trump has not weighed in on the sanctions package that the Senate is preparing against Russia, but did signal that if the peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia stalled, he would sign them into law. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
In a brief order today, the Supreme Court said it will consider whether to revive a challenge to a state's policy of counting mail ballots after Election Day. And in another case, the court declined to consider challenges to strict gun laws. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Supreme Court said on Monday that it would consider whether to revive a congressman's challenge to an Illinois law that allows mail-in ballots to be received and counted up to 14 days after Election Day. But they won't hear Representative Michael Bost's challenge until the court's next term, which begins in October. Lower courts ruled that Bost and 2 2020 Republican electors from the state didn't have legal standing to challenge the law. The Illinois law, which changed in 2005, allows mail ballots to be counted as long as they're postmarked on or before Election Day. At least 17 other states allow ballots that arrive after Election Day to be counted. Bost argues the ballot receipt deadline is preempted by 2 federal statutes that set a uniform day for federal elections. The state's election board is urging the justices to pass on this case. They argue the lower court's rulings are consistent with prior Supreme Court decisions. If the high court rules that the challengers do have standing, it will clarify who is able to bring such lawsuits, and the legality of the state's counting practice will be reviewed by the lower court. In other Monday Supreme Court orders, the justices declined to hear a challenge to states' restrictions on certain semi-automatic rifles and on magazines that hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition. Lower courts in Maryland and Rhode Island rejected arguments that the restrictions violated the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The cases would have offered the justices a chance to further expand gun rights. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who sided with the majority, expressed sympathy in the Maryland case with the challenger's argument that AR-15 rifles are in common use by law-abiding citizens. He said that issue will likely return to the Supreme Court soon. Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch dissented from the court's decision not to hear the cases. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, officials from ICE and the U.S. Attorney's Office announced the largest number of illegal immigrant arrests and raids across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts this past month. Could California seniors lose health care coverage if they have too much money in the bank? A new proposal from Governor Newsom could make it harder for some seniors to qualify for California's Medicaid program, Medi-Cal. Christina Corona reports from the West Coast. Harvard for decades has been a training ground for up-and-coming CCP officials and sometimes their family members. This has some U.S. leaders raising concerns over national security. Jason Blair has that report for us after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. At a press conference today, ICE and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts reported the largest number of arrests so far in their illegal immigration enforcement efforts. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
ICE officials joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts on Monday to announce what they call the largest number of arrests so far. An ICE official talks about the results of a month-long enhanced targeting operation.
These brave men and women have worked tirelessly to arrest approximately 1,500 criminal aliens and illegal aliens during Operation Patriot. In the beginning of May, ICE and its federal and state partners launched the whole-of-government effort to remove dangerous criminal aliens from all over the Commonwealth.
Acting Director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement Todd Lyons said hundreds of agents and officers risk their lives every day to remove dangerous criminals. But he said they need cooperation from local cities.
If sanctuary cities would change their policies and turn these violent criminal aliens over to us, into our custody, instead of releasing them into the public, we would not have to go out to the communities and do this.
Massachusetts U.S. Attorney Leah Foley said the department is committed to protecting their communities and prioritizing the well-being of their public.
Since January 20th, our office has charged well over 50 foreign nationals who unlawfully re-entered our country after being deported. This includes 15 individuals charged in the last month alone. These individuals violated our immigration laws when they entered the United States unlawfully.
Out of the approximately 1,500 arrests, 790 of them had criminal convictions, and 277 had final orders of removal or deportation. Foley said her office will not tolerate anyone who obstructs ICE operations.
What I have seen on the news and in social media is concerning, to say the least. Agents' safety is paramount, and it is a felony to threaten or assault a federal agent. I want to be clear about that. No one is above the law.
Lyons reported that a significant number of the criminal aliens were drug traffickers, sex offenders, murderers, and foreign fugitives. In an interview with Fox News on Monday morning, he said there are ongoing efforts to identify all of the individuals who have overstayed their visas, saying millions have come in. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing strict new rules for seniors applying for California's Medicaid program, Medi-Cal. The plan would bring back a test requiring applicants to prove they have less than $2,000 to qualify. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing to reinstate an asset test for seniors in order to qualify for Medi-Cal healthcare benefits. Under the plan, individuals would need to have less than $2,000 in assets, including savings, a second car, and retirement accounts to be eligible. Newsom says the move is necessary to address a budget shortfall as Medi-Cal costs have surged by over $20 billion in the last decade. The proposal would also freeze new Medi-Cal enrollment for undocumented adults as another way to control costs. According to the state's Department of Finance, the rising costs are due to higher enrollment, pharmacy expenses, and managed care. The test was previously required for seniors but was eliminated in recent years. Newsom now wants to bring it back to save money. The administration estimates the asset test would save nearly $800 million by 2029. Advocates for low-income and disabled Californians say the proposal would cause serious harm to vulnerable communities. Disability Rights California says it forces people into extreme poverty just to keep their health care, calling it a dangerous step backward. However, Newsom defended the proposal, telling the LA Times, "None of this is the kind of work you enjoy doing, but you've got to do it. We have to be responsible. We have to be accountable. We have to balance the budget." Christina Corona, NTD News.
Former students at Harvard University include a long list of officials from the Chinese Communist Party. Since the 1990s, Harvard has trained many senior and mid-level CCP leaders in executive and postgraduate studies. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
For decades, Harvard University has been training officials from China and sometimes even their family members. According to a recent report by the Wall Street Journal, alumni include a former party vice chairman and former vice premier. And most recently in the spotlight, Chinese leader Xi Jinping's daughter. Some U.S. lawmakers say that the Chinese Communist Party is using American schools to gain knowledge and skills to ultimately use against America and American interests. Some Harvard alumni include Li Yongchao, former vice president of the CCP, Liu He, former vice premier and trade negotiator, and Li Hongzhong, current senior legislator. In the early 2000s, Harvard launched a short-term program called China's Leaders in Development, which included training split between Harvard and Tsinghua University in Beijing. Harvard said this program was to, quote, help prepare senior local and central Chinese government officials to more effectively address the ongoing challenges of China's national reforms. On Wednesday, the State Department said that the U.S. is clamping down on its screening of visa applications from China and will, quote, aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields.
The State Department is determined to protect Americans' right to free speech and to counter the malign influence and actions of the Chinese Communist Party. The bottom line, we are using and will continue to use every tool in our tool chest to make sure that we know who it is who wants to come into this country and if they should be allowed to come in.
The department hasn't revealed any details on the criteria the Trump administration will use in making decisions. And on May 22nd, the Trump administration said it will revoke Harvard's ability to enroll foreign students, alleging that the university is working with the Communist Party. Harvard was given 30 days to contest the move, and Harvard has since filed a lawsuit in response. Harvard isn't the only school to teach Communist Party leaders. Other universities have offered training to CCP officials, including Stanford, Syracuse, Rutgers, and the University of Maryland. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Coming up, Britain takes a turn and will prepare its military to fight a modern war, building new nuclear submarines and at least 6 new munitions factories. It comes after cuts to UK defense in recent years and Trump's push for Europe to step up its security. Malcolm Hudson in London. At a top global security summit, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warns of China's growing threat, vowing stronger defenses in the Indo-Pacific and a pushback on Beijing's reach. Deanna Monahan has the key takeaways. Multiple elections underway overseas. Poland elects a conservative president, while South Koreans get ready to choose their own new leader. Jack Bradley tells us what the elections mean for global alliances and relations with the Chinese Communist Party when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Britain takes a dramatic turn in its approach to defense, now gearing its military to be ready to fight a modern war, building new nuclear submarines and at least 6 new munitions factories. It comes after cuts in recent years to UK defense and follows President Trump's push for Europe to step up its security. NTD international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more.
Britain says it will radically change its approach to defense to address growing global threats. The UK's Strategic Defence Review, published Monday, sets out a raft of measures to prepare the country to fight a modern war. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he's 100% confident in the new plans.
We are moving to warfighting readiness.
as the central purpose of our armed forces. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready, to deliver peace through strength.
The announcement follows President Trump's insistence that Europe must take more responsibility for its own security. Starmer renewed his pledge to raise defense spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027 and set a goal, but no commitment, of 3% by 2034. This is significantly short of Trump's calls for 5% of GDP. That said, Starmer said the plan would create
a battle-ready, armour-clad nation with the strongest alliances and the most advanced capabilities equipped for the decades to come.
The Strategic Defense Review made 62 recommendations, all of which the government accepted, including building up to 12 attack submarines for the Royal Navy, procuring up to 7,000 long-range weapons built in the UK, opening at least 6 new munitions factories, and setting up a new cyber command and investing $1.3 billion in digital capabilities. Britain's Chief of Defence Staff said it is a welcome day for defence.
It's a brand new defence review. It affirms the importance of nuclear. It affirms the importance of NATO and our role in NATO. And it also reflects that the threats that we face mean that we have to modernise and innovate at the same time.
But with limited finances, the government's plans seek to make the army focus on being more lethal rather than larger. It aims to learn from Ukraine, where drones and technology have transformed the battlefield. British Defence Secretary John Healey says,
"And we will make the British Army 10 times more lethal by combining future technology of drones, autonomy and AI with the heavy metal of tanks and artillery."
The Strategic Defence Review also lays bare the potential impacts on the way of life in the UK in the event of a war, highlighting potential missile attacks on critical infrastructure as well as increased cyber attacks. The review said Britain is already subject to daily attacks, which test the UK's vulnerabilities as an open economy and global trading nation. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over the weekend said Washington will bolster its defenses overseas to counter rapidly developing threats by China, especially in its aggressive stance toward Taiwan. NTD's Dana Monahan has the takeaways from the Shangri-La Dialogue Global Security Conference in Singapore.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is increasing security in the Western Hemisphere, taking back the Panama Canal from what he described as the malign Chinese influence.
China did not build that canal. We did. And we will not allow China to weaponize it or control it.
Hegseth called China's behavior towards its neighbors and the world an urgent wake-up call.
President Trump has also said that Communist China will not invade Taiwan on his watch. So our goal is to prevent war, to make the cost too high, and peace the only option.
The defense secretary says the U.S. does not seek conflict with the communist nation.
But we will not be pushed out of this critical region. And we will not let our allies and partners be subordinated and intimidated through its massive military buildup and growing willingness to use military force to achieve its goals, including gray zone tactics and hybrid warfare. China has demonstrated that it wants to fundamentally alter the region's status quo.
China protested against Hegseth, calling it a threat. It accused him of ignoring the call for peace from regional countries and of advocating a Cold War mentality. Australia is also sounding the alarm on Communist China's actions.
What we have seen from China is the single biggest increase in military capability and build-up in a conventional sense by any country since the end of the Second World War.
Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles says Australia wants to see strategic transparency and reassurance provided by China.
And an understanding of why it is needed to have such an extraordinary military build-up that China is engaging in.
How are you doing? How are you?
Hegseth has urged Australia to substantially boost its defence spending to 3.5% of its GDP as soon as possible, saying the investment would help maintain peace through strength in the Indo-Pacific. The Philippines says you only need to look at how China treats their much smaller neighbors to envision a China-led international order.
What the Chinese government considers fair and just may stand in stark contrast to the norms and values accepted by the rest of the world.
Meanwhile, Lithuania says the United States' strategic focus on the Indo-Pacific is both justified and necessary, but not America's responsibility alone.
And the convergence of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea into an increasingly coordinated authoritarian axis, let's put it diplomatically, demands an equally unified response by us.
And the Dutch are warning that Chinese cyber espionage targeting the Netherlands is intensifying. The Dutch defense minister said Saturday that the Chinese Communist Party is especially focused on stealing advanced semiconductor technology. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A Trump-backed conservative wins Poland's presidential election, while South Korean voters are gearing up for their presidential election tomorrow. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Poland's new president, Karol Nawrocki, won nearly 51% of the vote, barely beating the more liberal candidate, the mayor of Warsaw, who received about 49% in the runoff election. Nawrocki is 42 years old, and he campaigned on a nationalist Poland First agenda. He's also endorsed by President Trump, meeting with him at the White House during his campaign. He supports giving military aid to Ukraine to help him fend off invasion. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky offering his congratulations.
My congratulations to the president, new president of Poland. And Poland is our big friend and strong neighbor.
The outcome of this election could create a conflict with the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who's more liberal. Nawrocki has the power to veto his legislation, and he's also been a staunch critic of the European Union. He's also said that he would oppose Ukraine's membership to NATO. Meanwhile, over in South Korea, voters are gearing up to elect a new president on Tuesday. The two candidates are Lee Jae-myung and Kim Moon-soo. Lee represents the Liberal Democratic Party and Kim from the conservative People Power Party. The election was sparked by the removal of former President Yoon Suk-yeol, who imposed martial law for several hours last December. A poll published late last week by Real Meter puts Lee ahead with 49%, and Kim with 37%. Many analysts are looking at this election as a turning point on whether the country will move closer to the U.S. or closer to North Korea, China, and Russia.
Now, South Korea has had leftist presidents before, but Yi is different because he is more determined, he's more ruthless, he's more pro-North Korea, he's more anti-U.S. than his predecessors.
He's another ally of Xi Jinping, we should point out.
And Kim Jong-un.
South Korea maintains one of the largest U.S. military bases, but certain aspects are widely considered under the influence of the Chinese Communist Party as well as North Korea. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
A Hong Kong man is fighting for his city's freedom while living in exile in Taiwan. Fu Tong and his wife were among the first demonstrators in Hong Kong charged with rioting in 2020 after pro-democracy protests started in 2019. Fu is now preparing to mark this year's anniversary of Beijing's June 4th massacre. Here's the story.
Fu Tong co-hosts a Hong Kong human rights exhibition in Taiwan's capital, Taipei. It showcases artwork and photos from the protest movement. He is now preparing to mark this year's anniversary of the violent response to protesters in and around Tiananmen Square in Beijing on June 4, 1989. Before dawn, Chinese tanks entered Tiananmen Square. They crushed weeks of pro-democracy demonstrations by students and workers. Taiwan is the only part of the Chinese-speaking world where June 4th can be remembered openly.
When Hong Kong can no longer hold a June 4th vigil and can no longer even mention it, Taiwan's existence becomes very important. It's one of the very few places in Asia where people can openly commemorate the June 4th incident, discuss it, and even condemn the Chinese Communist Party. The existence of such a space is hugely significant.
A national security law imposed by the Chinese Communist Party has outlawed such events in Hong Kong.
We have witnessed how our relatively free city can be completely silenced in just 5 years. Saying something anti-China or expressing views the government doesn't like can get you arrested and detained, with no idea when your trial will happen or how long you might lose your freedom for.
Fu leads tours of the Hong Kong Human Rights Exhibition in Taipei while also sharing some of his experiences from the front lines of the protests. He nevertheless feels that the message he hopes to convey is difficult to reach those still living in Hong Kong. But Fu's story resonated with some Taiwanese visitors who fear the island may head down a similar path as cross-strait tensions continue to escalate.
Freedom and democracy do not come easily. While listening to the tour just now, the guide choked up several times. I just think it's incredibly suffocating to see a once free and democratic place turn into what it is now. I really hope this will never happen to Taiwan.
We are well aware of what the Chinese Communist Party wants to do to us. Their methods may not be the same as what they did to Hong Kong. Instead, they might use cultural infiltration or gradually influence our daily lives.
Fu remains committed to advocating for Hong Kong issues and the values of freedom while living far away from home.
I really feel like I've been chosen to be in this era. If I don't step up to do things that seem foolish and unrewarding, then who will? As long as I can, I'm willing to keep going.
The Chinese Communist Party has never provided a full death toll of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Rights groups and witnesses say the figure could run into the thousands. Public discussion of what happened on June 4, 1989 is taboo in China.
Coming up, Paris erupted in violent unrest following the French national soccer team's victory at the European Championship. Authorities reported 2 deaths and over 500 arrests. David Vives reports. And in baseball, the last-place Colorado Rockies find themselves on the wrong side of history. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Riots broke out in Paris this weekend following the French national soccer team's victory at the European Championship. Hundreds were arrested and millions in damages reported across France. NTD's international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
While Paris celebrated its national soccer team's victory at the European Championship, the capital was hit by violent unrest involving suburban youth. France's interior minister said on Sunday that barbarians have taken to the streets of Paris to commit crimes. The violence was widespread. 2 people died, around 200 were injured, including 7 firefighters and a police officer now in a coma. Over 560 people were arrested and many shops were looted or destroyed. 264 vehicles were set on fire. Damages are estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars across the country.
We saw shocking scenes of police and firefighters being attacked. It seemed like one part of France was celebrating while another came out to commit violence. It's starting to look like a foreign war on our streets. One person was killed in Grenoble and a 17-year-old boy was fatally stabbed in a fan zone in Docks.
The violence in Paris had been anticipated by the prefect of police, and 5,400 officers were deployed in the capital. Still, their impact was limited.
Police tried their best to prevent the damage, but you need to realize that when you're dealing with groups, dozens, even hundreds of groups of 30, 40, 50 young people acting together, it's very difficult for police forces to stop them.
French President Emmanuel Macron commented on Sunday that nothing could justify what happened and that those responsible for the violence would be prosecuted. Le Figaro commented that the most troubling part is how little seems likely to change, calling such violence a new norm. Rudimana added that while he hopes for strong judicial sanctions, he has little hope this won't happen again.
We police officers have no illusions. We tell ourselves that the next event, the next sporting victory, these barbaric mobs will be back, marching, looting, assaulting. That is very sad.
Some district mayors debated on Monday whether the Champs-Élysées should remain closed and barricaded to prevent looting and vandalism during sports events. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, first, good to see you again. A busy time in sports. Let's start in the NBA, though, as the finals are now set. The Indiana Pacers will face the Oklahoma City Thunder for the title. What do you make of this matchup?
Well, I certainly think we're going to have some fast-paced games. We saw in the last round, certainly Oklahoma City was able to convert their very good defense into a lot of fast breaking. Certainly, it's definitely against Denver as well as Minnesota. Now, on the other side, in the Eastern Conference, of course, I was very surprised that Indiana came out of the Eastern Conference. I certainly thought it was going to come down to the Cavs and the Celtics there, but Indiana came out instead. Now, let's actually listen to what Indiana head coach Rick Carlisle said after they eliminated the Knicks on Saturday night.
Oklahoma City has been dominant all year long, with capital letters in the word dominant. Defensively, they're historically great, and they got all kinds of guys that can score. It's two teams that have similar structures, slightly different styles, but Oklahoma's playing faster this year, and so I think it has the makings of a great series. To me, it's from a coaching perspective, it's two teams that are fun to watch and fun to watch compete. So, we're looking forward to the challenge, and they have the MVP, and so that's always an important thing. We just can't celebrate too much. It's, you ask a question like we've accomplished something, and getting to the NBA Finals is an accomplishment. But if you start looking at it that way, you'll go into it with the wrong mindset.
Yeah, so game one is not till Thursday night. That'll be in Oklahoma City. So no basketball until then, Tiff. I don't know what we're going to do until then. It's a little rough.
Well, until then, moving to baseball news, the Colorado Rockies were swept again this past weekend to move their record to just 9 wins and 50 losses. Where does the start rank in baseball history?
Well, the bottom, unfortunately. In the modern era, now that goes back to 1901. This is the worst start ever. So you have to go back 125 years. You actually have to go back to 1884. That's where the Kansas City Union started off 7-50. That's the only worst record, so quite a long time here. Now, in any case, the Mets swept them this past weekend. That's the 10th time in 20 series that they've been swept. They're already on their 4th 8-game losing streak of the year. Now, the funny thing is, I don't think anyone really saw this coming. I mean, I don't think anyone really picked them to win the World Series. But after the Chicago White Sox had that really rough season last year, I think they were the team everyone thought might still be struggling instead of the Rockies. So, in any case, tonight, they go for win number 10 against the Florida Marlins in a game that just started a few minutes ago. Now, for perspective, the Detroit Tigers are also going for win number 40 tonight. It just shows you how far ahead other teams actually already are than the Colorado Rockies. So, tough start for Colorado.
Well, looking now at college football news, Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark publicly supported a new playoff format called the 5+11 model. What's this about?
Yeah, this is the new playoff format. Five highest-ranked conference champions and just 11 wild cards would make up this 16-team format. Now, currently we have a 12-team format, very similar. It's just the 5 highest-ranked conference champions and the 7 wild cards here. But there's also another proposed format out there for 16 teams that includes 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, but then just 2 each for the ACC and Big 12, and then 1 other from a non-Power 5 conference. So it would be 13 automatic bids out of the 16 teams. Now, Yormark said he was against that model, saying we want to earn it on the field. So I think as a fan, more people will probably agree with that model. Now, of course, you have to remember the Big Ten and the SEC have more say in these playoff negotiations for whatever reason. Of course, there's also big money in these playoffs for those that qualify. So you can expect a lot of discussion over this. Now, this is only for 2026 and beyond anyway. For this year, for 2025, they're still going to be sticking with the 12-team playoffs. I think they want to have something finalized, though, by December for 2026.
So something to look forward to.
Something I will definitely be following, Tiff.
Well, looking at tennis news, the French Open continued with 4th round play today, and we had quite the upset, at least on the women's side.
Yeah, American Jessica Pegula, ranked 3rd in the world, was upset by 361st ranked Lois Bosson, a wild card entry here. Now, Bosson won in 3 sets. She becomes the lowest ranked woman ever to make the French Open quarterfinals. Lowest in 40 years. So congratulations to her. Now, also on the women's side, you've got Americans Coco Gauff and Madison Keys. Both have advanced to the quarterfinals. They will play each other, though, in the next round. That'll be tomorrow. Now, on the men's side, we also have 2 Americans into the quarterfinals. We've got Francis Tiafoe as well as Tommy Paul. They will not face each other, though. Now, also today, Novak Djokovic advanced to the quarterfinals as well. This marked his 100th win at the French Open. Only Rafael Nadal, of course, has more with 112. Got 112 wins versus 4 losses there for the legend Rafael Nadal. Now, for Djokovic, he will face 3rd-ranked Alexander Zverev, and that'll be on Wednesday. So, good match to look forward to there.
At least you have tennis to look forward to.
I've got tennis going on this week, that's right. So that, and once the NHL starts up again, they don't start until Wednesday too. So we've got a bit of a void here until then.
Well, I know Wednesday we'll definitely have you on.
Exactly.
Davis Honest, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.